Shalom. Yesterday I started recording chapter 15 of 2nd Samuel. My name is Joseph Shulam and I'm continuing the teaching on 2nd Samuel. We did 1st Samuel, now we're in 2nd Samuel, and I'm continuing the teaching. But yesterday I actually did record, I think, a very good lesson on the chapter 15 of 2nd Samuel. Some reason it got lost, didn't load, so I hope this time it will load. Okay, chapter 14 ends with this interesting story of David missing his son's Absalom. Absalom had organized to murder his brother Amnon because he raped his full sister by mother and father, Tamar. He enticed her, he raped her, he lied to her, and so Absalom waited 2 years after the rape to organize a murder of his elder brother Amnon, who was actually the heir to the throne. He was David's firstborn and he was the heir to the throne. And so Absalom was second heir to the throne, and he organized the murder of his brother for the rape of Tamar. And he runs to his grandfather. His grandfather was the king of Geshur, which is modern day Golan Heights. Now, Bibi Netanyahu, our prime minister, wanted to call it Trump Heights. Well, Trump is no longer president and it remained the Golan Heights. He was there 2 years. David missed him, his elder son, whom he loved. He was very good looking, very charming chap. So he sends a message, Absalom, come down. Absalom comes down, he falls face down in front of his father David. David forgives him and he kisses him, and that's the end of chapter 14. Chapter 15 starts with the following statement. After this reconciliation with him and his father David, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way of the gate, so that whenever anyone who had a lawsuit, was seeking justice, came to the king for decision, and that Absalom would call to him and say, "What city are you from?" And he would say, "Your servant is from such and such tribe of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right and just, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you." He volunteered to hear the cases of the people of Israel, and he supposedly did justice by them. Now this text is standing in opposition to the book of Deuteronomy, to the rules of the king of the book of Deuteronomy, that says the king should not amass himself private army and have people run in front of his chariot and gloat on the honor that he can harvest from the people. But Absalom had a master plan. The master plan was to dethrone David, because David did nothing to Amnon, who raped his sister, and she is now allocated to live in the house of Absalom as a living widow that has never been married, and that nobody will marry her now because she's been raped by the prince Amnon. So Absalom wants to avenge his sister and essentially to take the throne from King David. his father. Now remember, Absalom's mother was Maachah. She is the daughter of a pagan king who lived in the slopes of Mount Hermon, way up North Galilee on the other side of the river Jordan, or to the tributaries of the river Jordan. In New Testament times, it's called Caesarea of Philippi, that region. Philip, one of Herod's sons, inherited the Galilee as his land, as his inheritance. So Absalom is standing at the gate of Jerusalem and trying to divert the people to come and be judged by him rather than by the king or one of the king's servants. Absalom would say, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy here, there is no official of the king to do justice by you. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that I were made a judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me. Then I would give him justice. Oh, I wish I was the judge. I wish I was. The judge in this case is the king, the supreme judge, like Solomon later after him, that would do justice with the people. So he's looking for dethroning his father. The story is clear. And so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. Oh, he was very friendly. Kings normally have to, present themselves with honor and dignity. They don't go on kissing everybody that comes, every stranger that comes to town. But Absalom did it. He kissed every stranger that came to town. Instead of giving him a handshake, or now during the corona, elbow shake, he would hug them, kiss them. Very friendly chap. In this manner, Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the heart of the men of Israel. That's verse 6 of chapter 15. He stole the heart of the men of Israel. Was he sincere? I don't think so. He had an ulterior motive, and we're going to see that motive. Verse 7, now it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said to the king, please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt in Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. Let me go now to Hebron, to where our patriarchs are buried, where you, David, started your kingship. 7 years you ruled in Hebron before your men conquered Jerusalem, and you moved the capital of your kingdom to Jerusalem that didn't belong to any one of the tribes, like Washington, D.C. So, I made a vow up there with my grandfather, the king of Geshur, in Syria. This was a part of Syria, yes. And David, like a good father, didn't suspect anything. And says, okay, go in peace, shalom aleichem. So I rose and went to Hebron. Verse 10, then Absalom set spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, the sound of the shofar, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. You will essentially appoint me as king and agree with me that I am a king now of Judah, at least of Judah, in Hebron. Then Absalom went with 200 men invited from Jerusalem, and they went along innocently and did not know anything. The men that joined Absalom didn't know his plot. He kept it to himself. Then Absalom sent for Achitophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, I would say David's top counselor. Gilonite means he came from the neighborhood of Gilo, south of Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. and then it became Uzziah's leper colony. He moved because he was a leper, he moved his palace to Gilo. And when I was a student in the Hebrew University in archaeology, Professor Yochanan Aharoni, who was one of my teachers, was digging there. And so he gets Achitophel the Gilonite, he is not a stupid person. He's an evil person. He's like Tiago in Othello. Sneaky, sharp, conniving. You can't trust a person like that. So Absalom gets David's top advisor, political advisor, Achitophel the Gilonite, to come to his side, and with offering sacrifices, and conspiracy grew strong, for the people of Absalom continually increased in number. Absalom's force grew in Hebron. Now a messenger came from David saying, "The heart of the men of Israel are with Absalom." So David said to all of his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, let us run, or we shall not escape from Absalom." David understands finally, after a long period of time, that Absalom is after him, after his throne, after his crown, and after his life. He says, let's run. He could have amassed an army and gone and fought against Absalom, his son. He didn't want to. He didn't want to. It's one of the worst things when your family betrays you. When your family, you can't trust them anymore. It's a very difficult thing. So David is facing, he says, instead of fighting with my son, I'm running. Make haste, depart, lest he overtakes us suddenly and brings disaster upon us and strikes the city at the edge of the sword. In other words, he takes Jerusalem by force at the edge of the sword. And the king's servant said to the king, "We are your servants, ready to do whatever the Lord the king commands." Then the king went out with all of his household after him, but the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Then all the servants passed before him, and all the Cretites and Peltites and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. In other words, they went forward in front of the king to protect him. Who were these people? The Cretites, the Peltites, and the Gittites. The Gittites is easy. They're the people from Gath. They're Philistines that when David was 7 years in Gath and then moved to Ziklag by the order of the king of the Philistines, King Achish, then these people stayed with David. Gentiles, not Israelites, Gentiles. The Cretites, the Peltites, and the Gittites were Gentiles that had joined David during his flight from King Saul, who tried to catch him and kill him. So these Gentiles, 600 of them, had joined with David and went out to lead his escape and protect him. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place, from your own country, from your own people. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today? Since I go, I know not where." I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's waiting for him. You don't have to do this. Return, take your brethren back. Ittai the Gittite was a general, an officer. He had soldiers with him. Philistine soldiers on David's side. This is something that we don't know. The Middle East has never been monocultural. Not when Abraham got here, not when Moses and Joshua brought the people to the land of Israel. There were the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites in Jerusalem, and there were the Hittites, and there were. It was a mixture, like today. It's less of a mixture, but a bad mixture today too. These people are not our friends now. All the Arabs and terrorists and Hamasniks are not our friends. Some of the Arabs are our friends. The Christian Arabs are definitely our friends. But the Muslims are not. They have a double allegiance. Yeah. So Ittai the Gittite answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or in life, even there your servant will be." I'm going with you to death or to live, to life. And wherever you go, I'm with you. I'm dedicated. It's a very similar situation to Ruth the Moabite. That says to Naomi, your people are my people, your God is my, wherever you go sleep, I will sleep. Same idea. A Gentile that gives his alliance to the king, to King David. And David said to Ittai, "Go and cross over." Go forward. Then Ittai the Gittite and his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. And the king himself also crossed over the brook of Kidron. They went down southeast on the brook of Kidron toward the Dead Sea. And all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness of Judea, very harsh wilderness, where Yeshua was, hungry and thirsty for 40 days and 40 nights, and then the devil was trying to seduce him. And Yeshua answered him with scriptures. That's in Luke chapter 4. So there were also with him Tzadok, the priest, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until... Sorry, just a minute. Excuse me. Hello? כן? נכון. בסדר. אוקיי, מתי זה? את יכולה לשלוח לי טקסט למספר הזה בבקשה? תודה רבה לך. תודה רבה. תודה רבה. Bye. I'm sorry, that was somebody very, very important in the government. And I couldn't stop from answering him. So they crossed the brook of Kidron, going down toward the Dead Sea. The Levites, the priest, Tzadok and Abiathar, are carrying the Ark of the Covenant with them, the Ark of God. And David says to Tzadok, carry the Ark back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it, the Ark in other words, and his dwelling place. But he said but if he says thus, I have no delight in you. Here am I, let him do it to me as it seems good to him. David says, whatever the Lord's will, I'm submitted to the Lord. You return the ark back to Jerusalem. If it's the Lord's will, I will return to Jerusalem. The ark will be there, and the presence of the Lord will be there. But if not, whatever seems good to God, I am submitted. I'm willing to receive God's verdict. And the king also said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Now the priest here is also a seer, a prophet, like Samuel was a seer. Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. Therefore Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. So David went up by the ascent of Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up the mountain. And he had his head covered, and he walked barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and went weeping as they went up Mount of Olives. Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Ahithophel became a traitor. He was David's counselor, and he joined with Absalom. And David prayed to God to thwart the counsel of Ahithophel. Now it happened that when David to the top of the mountain, Mount of Olives, where he worshipped God, there was Hushai the Archite, Hushai Archi, coming to meet him, with his robes torn and dust on his head. And David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now also be your servant, then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? Therefore it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Indeed, they have there with them their 2 sons, Ahimaaz and Zadok's son Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send me everything you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. And when David was a little past the top of the mountain, there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was King Saul's heir, who met with him and a couple of saddle donkeys. On them 200 loaves of bread, 100 cluster of raisins, 100 summer fruit, which means figs, dried figs, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, what do you mean to do with these? And Ziba said, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, and bread and summer fruit for young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink. And the king said, and where is your master's son? And Ziba said to the king, indeed he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom to my father, the kingdom of my father to me. That's the beginning of chapter 6. So what do we have here? We have an interesting thing. Look at David. He's old now, but he hasn't lost his wisdom, his touch. He says to some of these people, to the priests, go back to Jerusalem. You be my spies there. Whatever happens there, you send me a message with the 2 sons of the priests. David has the same sneakiness that he did when he fought Goliath. He has a good strategy. He understands the situation, and therefore he flees. He flees in order to come back, not in order to remain away. He goes across the Jordan. He goes there in order to get away from Absalom and his men that are seeking to kill him, to take over the kingdom. He waited a long time and allowed Absalom to get away with murder, so to speak. He did, literally. He got away with the murder of Amnon. But we see the character of David here. We see the character of Absalom. We see the character of people like Ahithophel the Gilonite, who betrayed his master. We see others who come from far to join David and take his side. The study of human nature in this text is fantastic. The wisdom that we learn here, when you have scandal in the family, when you are being threatened by people whom you love, by people that you trusted, by people that you raised, by people that you nourished, that is the most painful thing in life when it happens to you. But David doesn't lose his touch. He doesn't lose his dedication to the Lord. He says, whatever the Lord wants for me, that's what I want for myself too. Not more. Hallelujah. We're studying these texts. Please read them alone. Try to get into them and draw from the wisdom and the history that is in them. May God bless all of you and all of us. In Yeshua's name, amen.